What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today when I talk to you about Lucid, go over some of the data points, break it down on what really moved in, go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So Lucid did close in the green, 2.37%, largely piggybacking off the broader market. 1936 a low, 2029 the high, and 8.8 million shares being traded. 10.7 is the average. Nothing from Lucid today, no SEC filings or press releases. Social media, they did post this. So Lucid Gravity has landed in Munich, experience it at IAA Mobility, and it looks like this right here, what will move us next, September 5th to the 10th. So that's kind of concluded. So I'm not really sure what this is all about, but generally what we do know is Lucid is really focusing on Europe in the short term. I don't know if that's because of tariffs, and of course that way AMP2 can really push a lot of their produced vehicles to Europe at a much cheaper cost. So we'll have to wait and see. But I guess speaking of tariffs, you kind of had the market somewhat on edge this morning, but luckily enough, CPI did come in better than anticipated. And what I mean by that, even though for face value, the data was a little bit hotter, behind the scenes, it was better. So month over month came in at 0.4, forecast was 0.3, year over year 2.9, forecast of 0.8. So like I said, a little bit hotter, but if we do look at the actual data points right here, energy did go up 0.7. So of course, just basic math, we can conclude that the other basket items did go down. So even though for face value, this data does signal that it got a little bit hotter, the true data is very bullish. So I think based on all of this, it does really signal that inflation is going down, and it really does solidify a rate cut. And going into next week, that's going to be also another big catalyst. And then as well, one thing that's coming out first thing tomorrow is this right here. So Lucid is going to be speaking at the Morgan Stanley 13th Annual Laguna Conference. If you want me to live stream this, I can definitely do that. It is bright and early. It is at 7:45 a.m. on a side note, but I think that hopefully this is going to be something that they can actually amp up investors on, because Lucid's actually done fairly well over the last 5 days. Got to give credit when credit is due. So over the last 5 days, it is up 10.56%. A lot of that had to do with its own technicals, in my opinion, but still, nonetheless, doesn't really matter why it's going higher. It is what it is. But when it comes down to shorts, so they have been increasing, starting to get back in. So of course, 2 times per month, we do have the exchanges giving the true amount of shares that is shorted. It is always delayed, but ultimately it does show as of August the 28th, which was disclosed on September the 9th, there was 38.41 million shares overall being shorted, which works out to be 30.6%. And so quickly going over here, unfortunately, a lot of this is still not really updating right here. So you kind of have to look up top. So as of right now, the percentage of the free float being shorted is 30.89%. And that has been going up a little bit today. Yesterday, they did return about 1.2 million shares. So overall, grand total, 38.78 million shares overall are being shorted. Shares on loan, though, 87.35. And that's something that kind of is high, especially based on the post-reverse stock split. Their outstanding shares did get affected. So it does go to show that a massive chunk of holders are lending out your shares. And I actually conveniently, I never brought it up in a previous video, but they kind of wanted to stay anonymous. But one person from Saudi Arabia mentioned that their broker doesn't even give them a option. So they pretty much have to lend out their shares. So I don't know if that's something that needs to be brought up on a larger scale, and maybe on an international for Saudi Arabia, or potentially other areas experience that. I know in my case, I have roughly around 6 different brokers that I use. Some don't even ask. So I kind of get where they're coming from, although I can call and say, hey, I don't want to participate. I don't want to lend out my shares. So I don't know if some of you have to call your brokers to actually do that. But in my opinion, to really stop this whole problem of shorting is that you need to kind of stop lending out your shares. I know some people make some pretty good money based on doing that, but I think it is what it is. Looking at the options, 2.5 million in calls, 7.7 in puts, 76% of all the options being done today were neutral in nature. And that's just based on the overall dollar value, such as this right here between 1050 and 1055, there was 1.7 million. And just based on the whole value of that, it eats up pretty much the bid and the ask. And this is why ultimately a lot of these platforms can't distinguish whether it's bullish or bearish because it makes up all the volume. And even just generally going over here for a second. So these are some of the abnormal transactions that did occur today. A lot of straddle still, but a lot more activity. And you can kind of see from the timestamps right here that this was a strategy, this was a strategy, this one as well. These looks like a multi-leg, so 4 different transactions right there. So yeah, interesting stuff. So for those of you that haven't researched options yet, definitely I recommend in doing so. One thing that surprisingly I did do, which was bullish, is I did sell a weekly, so it is expiring tomorrow. I did sell a $20 put. So potentially if Lucid closes below $20 tomorrow, I'm buying more Lucid. If it does close above, then I get to keep the premium. Well, I guess regardless, I get to keep the premium, but that's something that I was rather surprised about myself, and I kind of got hyped up with today, Lucid breaking above 20. So yeah, pretty good stuff. One thing I do want to bring up though, when it comes down to the options, quickly going back over here for 1 second. So this is, in my opinion, bullish. Of course, this could be interpreted different ways, but when Lucid's options first rolled out, they only had monthly, and it was only up to 37, but you can kind of see that they did recently open it up to 38. Market makers are the ones that are doing that. So they feel, market makers, that Lucid potentially could get to 38. So again, that's something to keep in mind. They also did open up weekly chains, and that was effective, I think it was this Monday, or it might have been on the Tuesday, but they did also open up the chains from $25.50 to $30. So again, market makers feel that Lucid could potentially get to these levels. So that's, in my opinion, relatively bullish. Speaking of bullish though, these are all the options that was done. So there's a consensus for it to be roughly around that 20 to 20.50. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub pretty much $19. So a little bit more evenly divided based on all that. These are all the transactions that did occur on the secondary market above $100,000. A couple big ones near the power hour. So 1.3, 1 million, 5.4. And then a couple of strings of buying right here. Dark pool, very popular as per usual. So there was another one that was done at 219 for 2.49 million, 125,000 shares. But aside from that, that seems to be the only large transaction above $100,000. With it closing at 1990, it is trading between this R2 and this R1. So 1927 is going to be the next strong support, which I don't really see that being touched. 2025 is going to be the next strong target, and it kind of bounced off of that general area. So we know that's a heavy resistance point, but given the momentum in the broader market and tomorrow's data point, which is Michigan consumer sentiment, if that comes in better than anticipated, you could see the market just continue to explode higher. One thing as well, just quickly popping over here, looking at some of the technicals and the flow. So based on all of this, you do see a lot of algorithmic trading. And so of course, as I mentioned, even though you did have somewhat lower volume, you had a lot of good transactions on the dark pool. Dark pool often enough used by shorts as well as hedge funds, but generally looking right here, you had a lot of algos. And as I mentioned, when Lucid or any stock closes in the green, but you see outflow higher than inflow, it is fair to assume as well that hedge funds were buying. Looking right here where it did close, ultimately you do have a couple walls right here. So roughly around that 20, and then also just above that, roughly around that $21 range. So if Lucid is able to hit hard and break above that, essentially you could see a very nice push higher. And maybe this is why market makers did open up those additional chains. One thing to take note of though is because of the amazing performance that it's had, at least in the short term, it is considered relatively overdone and overbought. So something to keep in mind. So if there is a negative piece of news, you could see some volatility associated to that. But honestly, the fact that Lucid's had 5 consecutive green days is deserving of a round of applause. And I honestly can't really even think of the last time that they had 5 consecutive. So that's 4 right there. Possibly like maybe when it was running up like here, this looks like 4 transactions right here back in 2023. Yeah, honestly, I can't even remember the last time it's actually had 5 consecutive days. So this is somewhat unheard of. Let me know your general thoughts on that in the comments below. When it comes down to tomorrow's conference, do you think that there's going to be any positives that they bring up that's going to really cause the stock price to move higher? Or is it just going to be more of a Peter type of style where they just regurgitate old news? What's your general thoughts on that? Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. For those of you that are new to options, have you been finally dabbling with Lucid options, whether it be doing covered calls, straight calls, or what have you kind of been doing? And if you haven't, what's really holding you back? So let me know your thoughts on that. One final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you're looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Even I did signal open door when it was at $8 yesterday. When they dropped the news, I said it was going to go to 1047. Kind of hit that exactly on the head. Same with Adobe. I did signal that their earnings was going to be relatively positive. It is moving up after hours. Same goes for SNPS. When this did and was at $380 yesterday, I signaled that it was a strong buy, went up 13% today. So definitely worthwhile to pop over the Patreon, link in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.